Well, g'day and welcome to Clayton Today. In this series we're going to discuss a current or a controversial issue and we'll be looking for ways to make sense of it within a Christian framework. Today we're looking at what affects our ability as Christians to talk about God in public. And with me again is David Holloway, the Vicar of Jesmond Parish Church in Newcastle in the UK. Hi David, welcome.
Thank you.
David, the statistics year on year seem to say that about 60 to 70% of the population would label themselves as Christians. You would think that in an environment where so many people call themselves Christians, it would be quite easy for Christians to talk about God in public or in the workplace or places like that. Is that the case?
No, it's not easy, but it's worth just thinking about those statistics, because many people fail to realise that there's such a tiny percentage of the population who don't actually claim to have some allegiance to the Christian faith. And we're only talking about 6%, just about 3% Muslims, tiny percentages of Buddhists, Hindus and so forth. Nevertheless, the public generally thinks, and because of the way the media's been working, that we are a genuinely large multi-religious, multi-faith community. Well, we're not. Nevertheless, because that's the case, many people feel very reluctant to be speaking about their faith. And I mean, a classic example was Tony Blair. I mean, Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister, I mean, according to Peter Mandelson, every night read his Bible, and yet when Alistair Campbell, that's his press officer, said, we don't do God.
So if that's the case for the Prime Minister, would you say that is the case for across the large sweep of most Christians would find it difficult to talk about?
Yes,
faith?
I mean, one of my colleagues convened a meeting for school teachers and from the area, and many came. You know, we're talking about over 100, I think. And it was quite interesting that even within one school, a number of teachers who were both committedly Christian didn't know that the others were. You know,
so that really says they weren't even able to say to each other.
And that's not to say
they were both Christians.
They were not good Christians. It was such the culture and the sort of circumstances meant that they didn't speak freely about their faith.
And would you say that that's the case just for private and personal, or is it also the case in sort of more public sort of types of situations?
Well, I mean, yes, you've got that where teachers or in schools, for example, where people do talk about their faith. There's a case recently, the West Country, where a very young child was talking about Jesus with another child of the Christian faith, and the teacher, you know, reprimanded or tried to stop the child. The mother was very worried. She sent an email to her friend saying, you know, she was a believer, ought to be praying about this. And blow me, she actually happened to be, I think, had a position in the school secretary or something like that. And she was actually dismissed, at least temporarily, while this was being investigated. And you're getting doctors, you're getting nurses who, you know, if they want to pray with patients, they get reprimanded and actually get censored.
So it does sound like that's getting almost fairly serious for people's professional careers.
Yes, it is serious. It is
what
serious.
do you think the cause of that is? Why is that happening?
Well, there's like a taboo in the culture for actually speaking about the Christian faith. And I mean, it's interesting. There are sort of studies on the way we express ourselves and expression levels, discourse levels it's called. You know, there's what you call the level of cliche, you know, how are you? And then there's straightforward factual information where, you know, you just talk about the football.
You talk about the weather.
Yes, you talk about the weather. You
Like
talk
that.
about, you know, you've bought a new car, bought a new washing machine or something like that. Then you get to ideas and judgments where you actually reveal more of yourself. You know, and that's to say, I think it's not a good thing. You've bought a new car. Then you get down to the level of emotions or feelings, where you're talking about saying, "I'm angry. You bought a new car." I'm
angry at the football.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So you get to that level. Then you get very deep, as it were, levels of communication, which you get hopefully in good marriages, where you really reveal yourself. Now, the point is this: that in this country, in the United Kingdom, you've almost got to get down to those last two levels I referred to, kind of levels where you are in the deeper levels, feelings and emotions and so forth, and that total openness. Whereas in
so
many
you're saying like you're going to get to those levels before you can talk about Christian belief or faith in God.
Yeah.
That
Whereas you see, what happens is that if you start talking about your Christian faith in a context where the discourse level is really not that deep, in one sense, it's not that you're failing to kind of witness, but you unilaterally kind of determining to change the level of conversation. Someone's having a cup of coffee.
So you're saying, so like over the work situation or whatever, if if you start talking about Christianity, you're actually changing the level of discourse.
I mean, if someone just wants a break from work and they just want a cup of coffee, suddenly to start a kind of great religious conversation in our culture is unilaterally, as it were, to change the discourse.
So then you're saying it's not even so much that almost as a taboo, it's just simply that it's an awkward topic now because it's just not something that can be talked about in any sort of public context.
But it's got to that because of a range of other factors in the culture.
I think you have sort of laid out the issue there for us. What do you think, what are Christians doing at the moment? If that's a problem, what are they doing at the moment to try and get around that, to create situations where they can talk about their faith?
Well, I mean, one thing that has happened over the years is to do big religious campaigns. Billy Graham, some people will know about, of course. What that does is makes a sort of climate of discourse possible, because someone like Billy Graham, he'd get interviewed on television, and then he'd raise questions, and then the journalists in the papers would all be arguing about what his views were.
So that becomes the sort of thing you can then talk about on that factual level around the water cooler or over tea or coffee at work, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's how it works. And indeed, we in our own church, we do carols by candlelight, and it's come in sort of quite a big way. And we do advertising on the metro. That's our underground.
So I guess, David, it sounds like that's a fairly successful strategy for getting around this problem. What's wrong with using that to solve this?
Well, it's fine. It's all rather expensive, and not everyone can do it. And I mean, clearly, you shouldn't have to go to such energy because you've got to get down to those deeper levels of conversation. When you have, say, a church does a mission, a local church, an ordinary parish church, say, does a mission. You know, people say, "Oh, haven't got any friends I can talk to." Well, they don't mean that at all, because they've all got lots of friends. They haven't got friends at that deep level. So then,
David, I've heard people say, the solution is we plan things well enough in advance so you can take the next 3 months to get to know your neighbours, invite them around for dinner.
Which is ridiculous, because it's not normal for people to have scores of very deep friends, but they have lots of friends who they're acquaintances with and they're in good relationships with. And what is happening is you can't talk freely with those people unless you put in a huge amount of work and you invite them out, you do all sorts of things, and that becomes a bit artificial. And people think, why are they paying me this attention? So it is quite serious, but it goes back to why we're in this situation in the first place, and it is because we don't do God, as Alistair Campbell says. And the reason why we don't do God is because, particularly, there's been a philosophy that we are, I mean, you start by saying, we are a multi-faith society. Therefore, all these religions have different views. If we're going to be living together, what we must do in living together with freedom and all the rest of it, we must not talk about these things about which we disagree.
And this really takes us back to the beginning, doesn't it? Where really the statistics say multi-faith is really exaggerated, and we are primarily Christian-based.
Well, many people fail to realise it's that worldview which allows for the freedoms, and we have a subordinate pluralism in Britain. Because we have that, and over history, that has allowed the freedoms we've got.
So your argument is that having that sort of common view allows space for the alternative views.
Yeah. Well, what happens is when you don't talk about the Christian faith in public, actually it's not that nothing gets talked about. You get other people manipulating media, manipulating education to put in other. Sure.
Thanks, David. We're almost out of time, but we've obviously raised a lot of issues here. Are there some resources you can point people to take some of these ideas further?
Well, I've written some of this stuff in a book called Church and State in the New Millennium. And if you go to our website, which is www.church.org.uk.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful. We are out of time. So thanks very much. And thank you for watching today. And if you want to follow up on any David's suggestions, you can find further information and more programs at www.clayton.tv. Do join us next time for more discussion on Clayton Today. Goodbye.